My first time
My first time was
terrifying,
shocking.
sad, empowering.
This is 36, huh? But let's address the internet violence and what we see. This has to end because it's a human right. I was always a people pleaser. Do things that make you happy, happy, happy. My name is Janet Mbugua. I suppose I could describe myself as a media personality because my background is in television and radio. And I've kind of ventured into the world of advocacy, which I wasn't fully aware of until people gave it a name and they say this is advocacy.
The only thing we can do now is hope that the laws are tightened and that policy is implemented to the point.
My journey in media started in 2003, actually. It was when I did radio for about a year, went to uni, came back, did television, a travel show on KTN for about half a year, and then transitioned to the newsroom from 2007 and kind of did news for 10 years. So I was in Kenya, then I moved to South Africa to still be a news anchor, producer, reporter, came back and did it for another few years. And then eventually in 2017, after really thinking long and hard about it, I thought it's a good time to just, I guess, take 5 and reflect on where exactly is this going for me? Where are my passion points? Am I meeting my passion? Am I also making smart moves financially? That kind of thing. I had a few endorsements going on. I had a child, he was very young at the time. And so there was a lot of reflection that I needed to have. And I think I was a little bit burnt out because it had been 10 years nonstop. And so within that time, I had started the journey of what we can call advocacy in 2013. If I'm to take us a little bit back, there was a story that aired called Periods of Shame that showed girls in Marigat in Baringo County using just in deplorable conditions managing their hygiene, menstrual hygiene. And then I brought that onto a conversation that I used to have every Monday on Monday Special. And it triggered Kenyans in a big way. Social media, I remember that night, the hashtag that was trending was sanitary pads KE. And I remember it was trending at #1. And a lot of Kenyans were saying, what is government doing that girls are having to use chicken feathers and goat hide instead of sanitary pads? What do we need to do? What budget is needed? So there was a lot of policy, but also sympathy.
By then I can talk forever about periods. Yeah. It really can because it's fascinating.
When I came up with the Nuadada initiative after speaking to my boss at the time, it was supposed to be symbolic. We give girls underwear and sanitary pads and then create the conversation around what do we do policy-wise to make sure that this doesn't happen again. And then it kind of really took off. I think that initiative launch day had a lot of attention because Her Excellency the First Lady was the guest of honor. There was a lot of political participation. Did it really take away from the day? Not necessarily, but I felt like when that day was over, I'm like, okay, so now what are we going to do? So I registered in Nuadada Foundation in 2014. And I remember I didn't really have a good understanding on how do foundations work? How do you go about scaling? I'm the kind of person who, if I believe I need to do something, then I just start it and then I figure it out along the way. And that's what I did. So with the foundation, the initial point of intervention was supposed to be giving sanitary pads and underwear, booklets like material, and giving mentorship, using media and advocacy as a tool for communication and having research done. And so I did that between 2014 and towards the end of 2015. We were very successful in a lot of the advocacy work that we were doing at the time. I think because there was an advantage of me being on TV. So I was able to take advantage of a mainstream media platform and have little features run there. If I was speaking somewhere, they were able to cover that for me. So it kind of amplified advocacy around menstrual hygiene. It became largely online advocacy over the next few years as my family was growing and priorities were coming and going. But at the back of my mind, I needed Nuadada to be an advocacy and intervention platform. And as I continued my work in this field, I realized something. There are so many people doing incredible work across the board. And yet I still found a gap in the communication of menstruation people not being able to say the word, people not being able to talk about periods, men, women, boys. And I thought to myself, how do we create a safe space for people to have this conversation?
Today we're going to be talking to Kenyans from different backgrounds and demographics. We're going to be showing them a video and then getting their thoughts and reactions around a very critical issue.
I really love storytelling. That's why I love listening to podcasts that have interesting elements of storytelling, watching documentaries. And so I thought to myself, what if we use storytelling as a communication tool?
My first time was weird, uncomfortable, awkward.
Got people to share their stories to show it happens to everyone. It happens to people. You're not alone in this issue. If you're talking to the girl who's feeling vulnerable and embarrassed, it's to show her you're actually not alone. Look at how many people have their menstruation. And then to also include men and have men say, yes, I recall the first time I heard about it, and now many years later, I'm an active advocate to end period poverty. And that's where the inspiration behind my first time the book came in. What happened is I wanted faces of menstruation. So that's how detailed I needed this campaign to be. Is I said I want to take photographs of people as they share their story. And I want these people to be from a very wide section of society. People that we don't often think about, like a woman who's visually impaired, a woman who is living with physical disability, a woman who was in prison, a girl who was a street child, a woman who's living in interior Kenya, a woman who plays rugby, women in media and entertainment, and just a very wide array, a Hindu, a Muslim. And so my joy is that I feel like I've gotten a group that is quite diverse and inclusive. I'm sure there's people I've left out, but that's why we have volume 2 that can be done. And so have them share their stories about my first time I had my period, but use that story to draw on other issues like sexual harassment and self-esteem and body image issues.
My first time was terrible.
My first time was empowering.
My first time was scary, disappointed, and ashamed, upsetting.
It's a book that shares short stories. Some are charming, some are heartbreaking. But what you take away from reading the book is, first, it makes you think about your own first time. So it's very reflective. And then it makes you realize, wow, I haven't really thought about what it's like for other women. I'm a woman who is physically abled. I'm a woman who's able to go to work because I'm not stuck in bed because of severe period pains. I really never thought about what other women go through. That's what a lot of the feedback has been so far. They just said it really shook me into reality. It's been a long time coming, I think, to finally see it in stores, to see it come to life, and people have been buying it. And then the other reflection is, oh, it was interesting to hear the perspective of men. An imam is featured in this book. This is a man who calls Muslim men to prayer, and he comments about menstruation in Islam. That needed to come out because we need men as allies, and we need men who men respect. So he's respected in the Muslim community by the fact that he's an imam. I have a pastor who, again, he leads a congregation. I have a musician as well. King Kaka is featured in the book because he's an ally in the menstrual hygiene movement. I have my father featured in the book. My father, I think, is one of the first feminists that I came across in terms of male feminists. And so the ideal is to get people to think a little bit about their own journey, get people to think a little bit about how does this issue actually affect different people, but how does it also come back to affect me? And you know what? It does, because period poverty feeds into the poverty cycle, the crime cycle. Women who are transacting sex for pads continue to exacerbate poverty and crime and teen pregnancy and HIV. It still comes back to affect us because it affects the society we want our children to grow up in.
I am what I am simply because at one given point in life, my mother had her periods.
So guess what? Period poverty kind of affects us all. And it's important that people recognize that it's not just some problem women deal with every month. She's talking about her periods again, that's not my problem. No, period poverty, period dysmorphia and PMS, endometriosis, fibroids, all those issues affect a lot of women and disrupt a lot of families. This book shows you that. But on top of that, it normalizes the conversation. So you hear women saying, the first time I started, I was 11 years old. There's a story where the woman starts by saying, who you? I think I'm dying, because that's what a lot of young girls feel.
I thought I was dying.
And so some of them are really funny, some of them are charming. There's 1 or 2 people here who said, when I started my period, I was so excited. I was joining the big girls club.
Exciting.
So it's a different wave of emotions. And I've had a lot of people interact with me saying, you really took me back to that day that I started my own period. And so that's part of it, is let's normalize the conversation. When was your first time? How did it make you feel? Has it shaped the way you are today? So for some people, they're like, my period has had no bearing on my life journey. I find like that's more of a rare story. Most people will say things like, it disrupted my ability to do sports. It disrupted my ability to have good self-esteem. It disrupted my ability to function. And those are the stories that I really want people to understand and recognize.
I've had to learn how to talk about it, because I never want her to think that A, it's something to be ashamed of.
Yeah.
Or B, it's something is wrong with her.
Right.
Or C, not be celebrated for it. It's like, men celebrate your manliness, but if a woman hide your womanliness,
Yeah.
I hate that. So.
Yeah. I did want to get different variants of stories. So the hope was it wouldn't be the same story all through. And initially that was my concern, because I felt like I had a very one-dimensional approach before. And that's when I made the decision to say, no, I need this to be inclusive, because there is no way inclusivity will breed the same stories. We will definitely have a different story with a woman who was formerly incarcerated and dealing with menstruation behind bars, to a woman who is coming from a rural area and dealing with periods in that sense. In your individual capacity, what are you doing? So you can step out of your home, go to your hometown, speak to your community elder, your leader, speak to people and find out what can we do collectively. That's my challenge to you. The idea wasn't to reinforce stigma and embarrassment. The idea was to say, yes, this happened to me. When I started, it was traumatic, but now that I'm managing it, my advice is that girls should know it's okay. I needed there to be a light at the end of the tunnel, because by the time a 14-year-old girl picks it up, which I understand from some of the people who I'm interacting with, their daughters are reading it, they're finding it really interesting, and they're also finding it comforting that all these people have ended by saying, it's not the end of the world. You will still thrive. You will still, yes, you might still have issues to do with period cramps and self-esteem sometimes, but you can overcome it, because we're all here for you.
For me and my daughter, it's much different.
Yeah.
I don't hide a lot of stuff from her.
Yeah.
There are some, of course, you will not want your daughter to know.
Yeah.
But the ones that she can grasp right now, I just show her and tell her, this is how this is done.
Yeah.
When you have a baby, this happens to you. She's like, guy.
Storytelling is a very powerful tool. You really get into the reality that people are living. And so I was moved many times. Some people really made me introspect even more. Washuka Thimba talks about it as a spiritual experience, which a lot of people are like, huh? But she's like, listen, these periods are sacred. I do not understand why they are demonized. That's why it's called moon time or a moon cycle. We've heard that term being used before for menstruation. Even the Imam talks a little bit about the Quran, saying that menstruation is a time for a woman to treat herself in a special way. So it was so interesting to get all these perspectives of, actually, no, it's not dirty. It's sacred. It's a powerful moment in a woman's life. And then having, again, persons living with disability saying, Janet, it's hard enough for you to use a public toilet, which are left filthy and they're not taken care of. I sometimes have to sit on the floor to be able to have to change my pad. So let me tell you, by the time I'd spoken to everyone, I was like, what I thought I knew, what I thought I was aware of, I knew nothing. I learned it through them. You saw the preview of some of the stories that were there, and I'm really curious to find out which ones have moved you or which ones stuck with you, because every time I've been going back and forth reading it. So initially, my first time was going to be a digital campaign. And again, I also called it my first time to create a bit of a conversation, because people were like, my first time what? And I remember when I approached, when we started having a conversation with the publisher, and they were like, so you're going to stick to the name? I'm like, I absolutely am sticking to the name. So it was going to be a digital campaign, something kind of over a period of a month or two. And then I thought to myself, I want there to be a resource that will live on shelves. I want there to be something that can be found in libraries, in the workspace, in malls, in organizations. I want it to be a legacy project, and I feel like a book can bring that to life, because that is a legacy project, you know what I mean? And so that's what made me say I'm going to do a book first. And I say first because it's going to take a different life in different ways. So the book is important because it's picture stories, it's short stories, it's an easy read, and it's a legacy tool. It's something that, by the way, hasn't been done before in Kenya. But then, because I'm in the digital space and I love new media, I realized that there's other opportunities to create even more stories. So a lot of the people who came to me and said, I want to share my story, but I can't show my face, there is likely to be soon, I'll announce when at the proper time, a limited edition podcast series or audio series that allows them to share their story in anonymity, because it's really not fair to create that kind of trauma to someone. And I asked them, could you do something in audio? They said, absolutely. So that's something that's in the works, to allow them to share their story, but in a safe space. We also had somebody record videos of the people we interviewed. So I have video files, which we will use to create some kind of video campaign or video series around the issue. So that's another phase. And then the other interesting request I've gotten from a younger, much younger audience is some kind of animation or animated book. And giving you a moment to think about, what did that first time feel like for you? What did it do to you? What did it lead you to believe about yourself? So why buy the book? It's a very accessible way to understand this subject matter. It's through the stories of people. And the persons who I've interacted with, who've experienced the book, are saying that it's a cool way of interacting with menstruation. People are sharing their stories. But beyond that, there's resources within the book that talk about matters, fibroids, and disability. So you still get to be educated on some of the deeper underlying issues and barriers, but generally, it's an easy tool to communicate the issue of periods. Girls who are aged between sort of like 11, 12, 13 onwards can read it. It's pretty accessible language. What they don't understand, I'm advising people to just be there for them if they have any questions. And for those who don't have access or can't afford it, there are people who are donating. So people should feel free to buy this book and donate it to a school or a library. So it really is for anybody and everybody. The other day I met a man who was saying, why should I buy this for my wife? And I said, because it's got everybody's story here, including hers. And it'll be an interesting way for her to talk with her friends about it, reflect, and also participate in matters around ending period poverty. And he just took it off the shelf and bought it, because he's like, as a man, you've kind of made me understand. And I want people to interrogate and challenge and ask a lot of questions. The book doesn't answer everything on menstruation. I really need to make that clear. There is a bill that has been passed in Parliament, hasn't been made public. I'm hoping that happens soon. That may probably have other information that the public needs to be aware of. There are handbooks, teachers' handbooks that are being used in schools. If you told my dad I want to be an astronaut, he'd be like, cool. The next day you're like, I want to be a hairdresser. Okay. But nothing about, you can't be an astronaut, you're a girl. I kind of found myself in this space. I wasn't necessarily called to it, or I didn't wake up and say, today from now on I'm going to be in advocacy. That didn't happen. I did start off in TV. In lifestyle, and then I moved to news, and I think as I matured in news, I started being more triggered by issues. Millions more girls are locked out of an education, and many more struggle because of gender-based violence. Internet violence needs to stop. I feel like I've always been a bit empathetic, and what really triggered me to next level was periods of shame. That triggered me. As a woman who just picks pads and throws them in my cart and just goes off, I'm like, there's people using chicken feathers? That triggered me as a woman, because I understand menstruation and I understand that it's already messy and cumbersome and problematic, and yet I have access to sanitary products. So I found myself saying, no, I want to say something. I want to say what I know, not to pretend I'm an academic. And so then slowly, even during my TV career, I would have organizations call and say, hey, could you come and mentor our girls? Or could you come and MC this event around the importance of breastfeeding? That kind of thing would start happening. And so I found myself in forums where very powerful conversations were happening, and I was either being asked to make a comment, to host it, to mentor, to be a panelist, and so I found myself in it already.
So thank you so much, and I love you very, very much.
Thank you. Bye. It's so unfair that people are ripped to shreds for asking questions. Don't do that. If somebody is being ridiculous, call them out. That's okay. But if somebody is genuinely trying to learn and to grow and to plug in, don't do that. So yes, it has been faced. I'm sure I'll continue to face it. But I've decided this is what I want to do. I believe in it. I believe it's making an impact. I want to be part of the change. I want to bring people on board. I love mobilizing. Just come, all of you. Known, unknown, just come together. Strength in numbers, let's all amplify and mobilize. And there have been allies, people who are like, I'll hold your hand, it's okay. I'll take you through the advocacy 101, those little terms that irritate you, that you don't understand. There's such an unlearning that a lot of men, and I say a lot, I'm very careful not to say all, because there are some incredible male allies, but there's a lot of unlearning that needs to be done. There's a lot of accountability that needs to start being learned. You need to learn accountability. You can't always blame everyone else for what you're thinking or feeling. You have to be in a space where you want to learn. And so I'm raising my boys with every intentionality to hopefully, and God by my side, just get them to understand that accountability is important. Allyship, your allyship is needed. You are privileged because you're male. How can you use that, or how can you be aware of that when things around you are going wrong? Just be aware. Be open to having the conversation. Don't be quick to be aggressive and judgmental. So yes, I am passionate about women's issues because I'm a woman, but I am also very passionate about bringing on men as allies. And that's why the book has men. And again, a lot of it is because I have these two sons who are going to be men. And so it's about a human rights collective call to action. The other day there was a conversation going on a table, and there was a man saying, I don't know, you guys need to convince some men to care about a woman who's being assaulted. They're like, if it's not somebody I know, then I don't know how to care. And he wasn't saying it from a bad place per se. It was a bit ignorant, but he was saying it from the conversations he has had other men say. And we were saying, you know, the same way you research and tweet, you could use those same resources to Google, to listen to podcasts. You have to be willing to educate yourself. Like, long story short, you have to. And so that's the call to action. And I remember saying, at the very least, you need to recognize assault as a human rights issue, not as an issue against women. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, I see double going to cry.
I would want to be remembered for inviting everyone to the table and to the conversation. Like Janet just invited us all. She didn't say, you can't come because you belong to this demographic or to this society. No, she invited everyone. She invited everyone to participate. I think for me, the legacy is inclusion, allowing people to use their voice and know that you are an advocate from wherever you are sitting. I did a TED Talk on that the other day. I said, you know, we're all advocates. It's just that we're very afraid of that word. But advocacy starts with you. So creating the legacy of saying, it doesn't end with Janet. The legacy continues because you ought to know that you are equipped. It's in you. You have to birth it. You have to learn it. You have to lean into it. And the legacy also to have really intervened in the lives of thousands, because thousands especially, yes, I could say of women, giving them access to economic empowerment so that they are able to manage their menstruation and their finances, but also it helps their families. So men are also included in the empowerment. So intervening in the lives of thousands, especially from Kenya and Africa, and really creating room for everyone to speak out and to be heard is something I'm very passionate about. My hope is that in the future, we wouldn't have to have this conversation at all. With the book now out in stores, it's at Textbook Center in Nairobi, in the various Textbook Center stores, and one can call them if they need to make an order. It's in Nairobi right now, but what I am planning on doing is having forums once a month for the rest of this year. Even when I was envisioning the book, I had wanted to do my first time forums or menstrual hygiene inclusion forums. And so I'm going to be taking them to different regions. So I will be coming to Eldoret, Mombasa, different regions to interact with people from different communities and understand what they're going through and workshopping with them. How do they also become champions? I love the idea of creating a new world of advocates. So what tools can I equip them with to make them feel a bit confident in their agency? That information will be coming out very soon of where will we be when will we be in Eldoret, when will we be in Mombasa, There'll be an opportunity for people to also have a one-on-one or just interaction with me as I also do book signings. So I'll bring the experience to different counties, as many as I can. I obviously can't go everywhere, but you know, the book has a life. The book is now for life, so it's not just going to end because 2020 is over. I intend to use this as a tool for many years to come, and so hopefully I can visit as many places, as many schools, and so that I think is important for people to know. And there's going to be book signings happening in February in the Textbook Center stores in Nairobi, and so it'll be on my social media at official Janet Mbugua on Instagram, at official Jane Mbugua on Twitter, and Janet the Journey on Facebook. And there will be dates and times for the book signing, so I'm really looking forward to seeing everyone.